Добрый день, дорогие друзья! Я очень волнуюсь, вы слышите голос. Сегодня мы собираемся делать совместную реплику с блестящей британской актрисой. Я ждал этого момента очень долго, и наконец-то это случилось. Идем же ее встречать, я только что получил сообщение.
Oh, that sounds very familiar.
Hello! Hello!
Hi!
It's Kristin Milward.
Hello!
Hello! Oh my God, you look amazing! It's my kind of studio. Yeah, and made lots of stuff here. You know, like we performed here, Hero of Our Time.
It is a wonderful room, though. You know why? It's the size and the space, but there's something about it. Because it's cleared for action. You know what I mean? So
Exactly. Lots of action happened here.
Here.
Okay, shall we start? And today we are going to recreate this lovely self-portrait by Frida Kahlo, right?
Yeah.
And I feel a bit embarrassed, but on the other hand, it's such a huge honor to me to be on your forehead. Are you okay with that?
Yep, that's fine. I've seen a lot of self-portraits of Frida Kahlo.
Yeah.
But actually I've never seen this one before for some reason. And I was reading a book very recently that I told you about called Marievna, which was about a Polish-Russian woman painter who was in France, in Paris, at the time that Diego Rivera was, and she had an affair with him and a child with him.
Yeah.
So it's very strange to meet Diego Rivera on my forehead from a completely different angle,
Yeah.
you know.
Your face is like tears, right? Is it easily for you to cry on the stage if it's necessary, if it's required by show or director, you know?
No, it's not. It's easy to laugh.
I have to ask.
Yeah.
Just because we have such a special plot and stuff
Yeah.
there. So, have you ever been in love?
Have I?
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
How many times?
Well, now you're asking, actually, how many times. The thing is that, you know, there are so many gradations, aren't there, of love.
No, I mean that
there
love.
You mean the insane kind
Exactly,
of love?
yeah.
Yes, I have. But certainly not to the same degree as her. Never.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, it's still time, you know.
Not a lot.
Well, you never know.
Tell you one very odd thing. And that was, I had a relationship years ago with a Norwegian man. This is many, many years ago when I was about 19.
Yep.
And I told you I was bilingual. And I remember him, this was a lawyer, and I remember him saying to me, I don't like you when you speak English. And
You said?
He said that.
Oh,
And I thought, isn't that interesting? Whatever it is I'm putting over, you know, when you speak another language,
Yeah.
you are inevitably,
Yeah.
things change. You know, it's the melody of the language, or it may be the fact that your voice, in my case, maybe my voice rose. He obviously thought I was more amenable or sweeter
Yeah.
in Norwegian
Yeah.
than in English. And I've never forgotten that. That's strange.
Actually, let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
I mean, not
Yeah.
about our
Okay.
makeup, but the question. You mentioned Norwegian,
Yeah.
right? So, what kind of your roots?
My roots are, oddly enough, I know more about my Norwegian family in many ways than I do about my English. I mean, of course I know about my English family, but my father was not a talker, whereas my mother was. And my father came from quite a peculiar background, whereas she came from a very, very loving and open family. I don't mean that they didn't quarrel.
Oops. Yeah.
Her father was, he was a diplomat. He grew up in Paris, didn't grow up in Norway at all, grew up in Paris,
Yeah.
went to university in Norway, became a diplomat, was involved in negotiations during the First World War.
Yeah.
And then he I think he had a nervous breakdown, and he ended up by becoming private secretary to the king. And that was his job until he died. And my mother was his third child, boy and a girl, and then a big gap of 5 years, and then a girl and a boy. And my mother and her younger brother were incredibly close. When she finished school, her father said, "Do you want to go to university?" And she said, No, I don't. I don't want to do any more academic work. So he said, well, nobody in Norway, nobody in Europe speaks Norwegian. There are 4 or 3 million of us. You have to learn languages. So he sent her to France for a year. And then she came to England for 6 months. And I think that's about right. And then her younger brother was studying law in Norway, and then he said, I can't stand it anymore. And he left. And my grandfather said, well, what my uncle wanted to do is to farm, but my grandfather said, I don't have money to set you up on a farm, you can't. So he was going to go into shipping, which is something that loads of Norwegians do. He came over here, and in 1939 he left to join the Finns fighting the Russians in Finland in the Winter War. And the day that he was due back in Oslo from the Winter War was the day that Norwegians woke up to find themselves occupied by Germany. And my mother ran through the streets to find him, to intercept him, because she was terrified that he would walk up to a German and, say, what the hell are you doing here? And anyway, he went home, changed his uniform, and went off and fought with the Norwegians against the Germans. And that went on for 3 months. After the surrender, he came back home and he said, I have to leave. So he took a fishing smack, and that he and 5 friends sailed over the North Sea. In 2013, my brother and I were invited to France. He was killed over France. We were invited to France as guests of this small little place. And they wanted to celebrate him. He had managed to avoid the village, and he had gone down in a field. So this was what he was... this was 2013, and he had been killed in 1943. So, and it was a most extraordinary event. It went on for 3 days, this extraordinary celebration of him with, I can't tell you how many, it wasn't the Free French, it was the Foreign Legion. There was a general from the Foreign Legion there. It was an extraordinary event. And joyful. And I wished my mother was dead. I wished that she could have been there, because she never got over his death. This mirror is terrifying. It tells me.
Why?
Because I think that if you don't have children, you don't have a constant reminder of how old you really are. It's glaringly truthful, I think. I'm at a stage where I think I don't want truth. It's too crude. You know what I mean? Truthfulness is too crude. Give me lies. Give me deception.
Alan Rickman.
Yeah.
He was your really close friend, right?
was.
What was special about him?
I think he was incredibly truthful.
What do you mean?
I mean, I'm not saying he was right always, but he was prepared to tell uncomfortable truths. He was very clear about what he felt politically. He was never going to dress that up. He was also incredibly generous, incredibly kind. And there are many people, myself included, who have every reason to be grateful to him. We were together at RADA, but we were in different terms. But then we worked together for 9 months in Manchester, where we got our equity cards. That was 9 solid months. And then he and we worked together in Sheffield for another extended period. And then we worked together at the RSC, and we lived in next door streets. So, yeah, so we knew each other very well. I remember Rima, his partner, ringing me and saying that he had cancer, and he'd been to dinner at my flat not very long before, maybe a few weeks. And Alan loved food, loved talking about it. Somebody once asked him in an interview in the States, Mr. Rickman, what are your hobbies? And he looked blankly at him and he said, what was it he said? He said, dinner. And he did, and I remember he came to me, and I just moved into this flat and the lighting was awful. It was very, very bright. And he'd commented on it, and I thought, he told me he'd had a stroke. I knew that because he had.
Yeah.
He looked awful, and he didn't eat very much. And the next day, I was round at his flat, and he said something about, I'm having miso soup, which he could obviously cope with. And at that time, the story was still that he had had a stroke, and we knew he hadn't been strong for ages. There was nothing new about that. And then Rima rang me and said he was in hospital. And I wrote to him, and because I thought I want him to know that this relationship has meant more to me than almost any other. But I kept thinking, I've got more time. I've got more time to see him. And of course there was no more time. And I remember going to, first of all, we went to the crematorium at Kensal Rise. And then after that, there was a service at St. Paul's Covent Garden, all on the same day. And I can remember people hugging each other by total strangers, and it's a terrible a memory of such excruciating pain. And I remember Rima, who was the only, she was obviously on so many pills, that, and also in a state of shock, that I think that, she was introducing people to one another, so we were a party. And it was, I think, we were all in a state of profound shock, and people flew in from all over the world. It's unbelievable. And I still think, I remember going to bed for about, every single day, I would wake up and I'd go, I'm not going to think about this, I'm not going to think. And I would block out thoughts by reading thrillers. obsessively. Not going to think. And because I thought I can't think. I mustn't think about him because it was so agonising. And that took about 6 weeks before I could just draw breath and allow myself to feel. It's terrible.
So, some updates.
Yeah.
My third eye.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah, I almost can see.
Now, what do you think of my face now?
I think it's quite good. What I would suggest. One more question about your trip to Kyiv.
There are a few reasons why I went to Kyiv. One was because I saw the effect that the play had on audiences here, both English and Ukrainian. And there was one girl in particular who spoke to me at the stage door, and I was very moved by what she said. She started quoting the play to me, and I suddenly thought, for an English audience, the play gave them a way in to understand what it would be like to be in the position of this woman whose everything was taken from her. But for a Ukrainian audience, it legitimized their suffering. And at the same time, I thought, I can give money, I can do all of this, but that's not personal. What I can do is go to Kyiv and perform. And I'm telling their story. So I'm not telling them anything new. But what I'm doing is offering my solidarity, and that's why I'm going back.
Щоб пісні звенели,